All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the video. If you're on your path to trying to hit $1 million months, one thing is really important to master, and that's cold paid advertising. The biggest companies on earth, take Apple as an example. I commonly hear like Lamborghini doesn't advertise. Yeah, they do. You're probably just too broke to get targeted by their ads. They advertise a fuckload. That's how they generate a substantial quantity of their customers. Sure, it's a combination of a few things. It typically starts with organic, okay? And organic is not like to be discounted by any means. Organic is generally where you master hooks that start to attract the ideal audience that you want to convert. You start to create content and understand the value of a nurture sequence, and you start to find what specifically works to take somebody from unaware to aware to nurtured to sold to upsold, to the path of, once again, just maximizing lifetime value of those customers that you're able to generate. Now, the thing is, usually the people who get stuck on organic, what they fail to do is transition into paid ads at all. Those are usually the people that get stuck. What typically happens after you master organic is you waterfall into warm paid advertising, okay? Now, warm paid advertising is a great first step into the advertising world. However, it limits you to the audience that you've already created organically. You're essentially just doing glorified retargeting. It is very effective, and it definitely expands your overall revenue. I've had big clients that have substantial organic followings. Okay, substantial, like in the millions. Their total quantity of impressions on a month-over-month basis for their organic channels is, without exaggeration, in the tens of millions to sometimes even hundreds of millions. Now, they can take all of those eyeballs and they can put them into paid advertising campaigns where they have to do the same thing but on a shorter time frame, meaning they have to take somebody from aware, okay, to nurtured, then they have to become sold. Now, typically, organic, once again, has a long, generally the business owners are unaware of the timelines of the organic sales cycle. They know that it works extremely well. They vouch for it like crazy. Like I said, a lot of people stay stuck there. But then once again, the ones who start to master warm paid advertising, they realize I have to condense, I have to be self-aware, and then I have to condense my organic sales process via paid advertising. That's why a lot of the biggest people in your given industry you might be operating in come to me and they learn about our paid advertising lessons that we teach, because we essentially replicate the organic sales process via paid advertising with a lot of my content advertising strategies. Now, to be clear, without going into detail on all of that, I just want to express the fact that there are a plentiful amount of ways to replicate the organic sales process and more importantly, condense the timeline of the organic sales process into a shorter window. Because at the end of the day, look, paid advertising requires you to front some cash. You don't want to be fronting cash for long cycles of time. You want to be able to front that cash and get enough cash back to pay off your credit cards, your sales commissions, your softwares, your payrolls, whatever costs go into generating customers for your paid advertising efforts. Those all have to be covered within that same credit card billing cycle, okay? So you have to, once again, whatever your organic sales cycle is, you got to condense it down to that at the least, okay? Ideally even faster. Now, to be clear, once you master warm paid advertising, the next part of the cycle is obvious, and that's cold paid advertising. Cold meaning people just don't know who you are. Cold paid advertising is not hard, okay? It is challenging, but it's not hard. Most people just don't get to this step because same thing, they get stuck along the way, okay? Now, to be clear, this video, the intention of it is to help you understand some cold paid advertising mastery lessons. I'm not gonna sit here and make some audacious claim like you're gonna walk away at the end of this video a fucking expert, world-renowned advertiser who's gonna be able to go and just crush paid advertising for cold audiences just because you watched one video. But I will say this, you will get a ton of value out of watching this video. You'll be aware of some very key lessons that you need to implement when you're doing cold paid advertising, and you'll understand how to do it in a way that doesn't risk stopping it too fast before you get to the point where it works, okay? So once again, you're gonna walk away from this video having a lot of cold paid advertising mastery lessons that are immediately become applicable to you and help you make a lot more money getting to your $1 million month. Okay, so to be clear, let's first start with just some frame here, okay? What happens organically that makes people come through so sold? We commonly hear it as the business owners ourselves talking to leads. We commonly hear it inside of our salespeople's feedback to us when they're describing paid ad leads versus organic leads. It is constantly say things like, oh, people just show up like ready to buy, they're enthused about the brand, like they know about the product already. Organic sales essentially turns your salespeople into cashiers, okay? The leads come through so warm, but once again, what specifically did they do? What is the customer path, okay? When you look at the customer path and you try to break it down, this is a key thing to be self-aware of, okay? Without self-awareness around this specific characteristic of, once again, the customer path, we lose a lot of value in being able to replicate the organic sales process via paid ads. We have to find those key videos, okay? We have to find those key moments for like what specifically took somebody and pushed them over the fence. Because it's generally not one thing. It's generally a combination, okay? It's a string of events that happened. And then we have to define the timeline for when those things happen, okay? Now, to be clear, a lot of organic businesses can typically point their finger at either one key video or like a set of key videos. I was talking to a guy the other day. He got to about 110K a month organically. And he says, you know, I did this one podcast with this guy. I published it on my YouTube channel. If you actually go to this guy's YouTube channel, it's his video that's like pinned there when you look at the channel. It's that like key video that's highlighted, and it's just this like hour something odd long podcast where it's a thorough interview walking through his opportunity, articulating the details of it, articulating his experience in it, flexing some case studies, you know, flexing some timelines for like how long it takes and how well he did with it and how much money it makes, more important than anything else, as a business opportunity guy. Now, to be clear, that was an hour and something odd minutes, okay? When you just look at that one key lesson that he was organically aware of, and you start to ask yourself the key question, okay, if I had to take that hour something odd long video, let's call it an hour and a half, and you had to find a way to get people who potentially don't know you that well, okay, which is really your warm paid audience, okay? Your warm paid audience is made up of a few things. Number one, it's your video views, okay? It's the people who saw some content, and you don't have to do like the 3 second. The 3 second kind of sucks. Ideally, what you want to do is like the 25% threshold and above. So like 25, 50, 75, 95. And obviously you capture all that with doing the 25% view audience. In addition to that, it's your IG, your Facebook, your TikTok. You can do it on there as well. And in some instances, for some of you guys, it's your LinkedIn's. And in addition to that, it's your YouTube channels, okay? Okay, so when you look at like, once again, what your warm audience is, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube, and it's generally like channel specific. You'll either have substantial Instagram followings, some Facebook followings, substantial TikTok followings, potentially substantial YouTube followings. And this is all of your page viewership, page interaction. This is in addition to that, like visiting your profiles is an example of page engagement, page interaction, page viewership, post engagement, people message the page, people saved posts, just overall, once again, interaction with your social profiles. Just to disclose, when you're doing warm paid advertising, your social profile engagement, like messages, saves, profile interaction, post interaction, visiting a page, those are typically of higher value than the video views. So if you're one of those people that just makes like weird viral content that has nothing to do with your brand to get additional viewership and eyeballs, which eventually leads to sales, the video views will not be as valuable because they won't be essentially people who actually watch something that relates to what you're going to eventually try to sell them. Versus if you're one of those more niche people who's like constantly making content. Great example, like look at myself. You won't ever catch me making some like weird content just to get viewership. Not saying that it's not a good strategy or that it doesn't eventually lead to more money, but like I just don't do that. Every video that I have is about something that I want to sell people on eventually. You know, it's about something that I can teach or something that I can do for people or like some kind of thing that's related to my service. All my video views will be very valuable to retarget as an example. Okay, so if you're like me in that regard, you'll include your video views. If not, once again, just focus on the page interaction for your social profiles and everything that follows, once again, with page viewership. Now, I digress. My point being, when you look at those people specifically, okay, are they gonna watch, you know, an hour and 30-minute video from you? Potentially. I, as an example, have an hour and 55-minute podcast that I did where it's great. It's just like that guy I was telling you about who did the hour and a half podcast, walks through what I do, how I do it, how I help people, you know, what I can do for people, money expectations, great for like course material, once again, like selling courses. Now, to be clear, I spend money on that. It costs about $1.05 to get somebody to watch the entire 1 hour and 55-minute video. I'll retarget the shit out of people who watch half of that video. But for $1.05 to distribute that podcast to people and put it in front of them and target who I choose to get it in front of, those people become so warm to hit with a very small daily direct response budget to go buy something or go through a call funnel, etc. What you have to understand though is like that video, when you look at the statistics of it on the front end, looks like it has like 10 to 15 million views. The quantity of people that watch to that hour and 55-minute mark, the 100% playthrough, is like a single-digit percentage of a percentage. You know, it's like 0.00 something or 0.0 something, okay? It's not even a single-digit percentage. So my point being, we gotta understand, like, we can't, when we're trying to condense the timeline, remember, that's the key thing we're attempting to do here, okay? We are trying to condense the timeline, okay? That's the key thing. When we do this, we have to find a way to get the messaging that's in that hour-and-a-half video, the messaging that's in my hour and 55-minute podcast, and condense it down, okay? Or break it up, okay? So once again, when we are aware of the customer path, sometimes, as I'm trying to express in this example, it's a single video. Sometimes it's a handful of video where somebody shows up to a sales call with you or your staff and they say, yeah, man, I've watched like a handful of your videos through time. Oh, which videos were they? Oh yeah, this one, this one, this one. You'll find a commonality. So if it's one video, we gotta condense that down. If it's multiple videos, we've gotta find a way to break it up and essentially put those people through that same sequence of learning that information in that sequence, okay? Now, condensing the timeline in terms of action, okay? That would mean, as an example, we have to take the key message, like the substance of what it is that we can potentially get people interested in, and we have to put it into a direct response ad. That's the first step. We have to be able to articulate ourselves in typically like under 90 seconds, okay? And we have to say, this is what I do, this is why I think it makes sense for you to do it too, or for you to pay attention to it, or for you to take this action, okay? Here's some potential objections that come up that I wanna handle right now. Here's the call to action, okay? So once again, here's what I do, here's how I help people, okay? Here's why I think it makes sense for you to do too. Here's some common objections that I get that I'm gonna handle real quick, and then I'm gonna end it with a call to action. I've gotta take that key message, whatever it is, condense it down to 90 seconds initially. The intention is I gotta get people from the ad and I gotta drive them over to my page, okay? And that page, depending on who you are and what you're doing here, most of the people, from what I've understood, it's gonna be a call scheduler. Some of you guys, it's gonna be a webinar. For the people that are selling something that can be sold through a sales page, in some instances it's a sales page, but a very small minority of you, it's gonna be that, okay? A lot of you, it's gonna be DM ads. These are typically the big three in terms of what specifically we see for the funnel strategies that you guys are using in order to, once again, start converting that traffic, okay? Now, moral of the story, once we get people from the ad over to the page, well, what assets can we deploy there that are the next step in our sequence where we can unveil some more information? Typically, it's either the VSL or it is a conversation for those who are doing the DM campaigns, okay? That conversation, to be clear, is typically you doing the same thing that's happening in a VSL. Now, a VSL is super simple to be able to do and take to about a 10 to 15 minute window. That's the most ideal scenario for a VSL nowadays, is about 10 to 15 minutes max, okay? Max 10 to 15 minutes. We have infinite data, okay, that I can sit here and show you again and again and again and again and again and again, where it's somebody who took longer than 10 or 15 minutes and it's just this massive, like this is what the engagement chart looks like. You'll typically see a pretty substantial drop off just in the first 2 minutes, but then after that, you'll just see a consistently declining retention of these people that are clicking and watching on your VSL. In addition to that, you have what's considered the play rate, which is the quantity of people that hit the page and just pressed play in the first place. The higher the play rate, the better. Obviously, the higher the retention, better. But that's just typically not how it goes. In a majority of instances, how it goes is like this, where a majority of people are gonna drop off in that 2 minute mark. It's gonna be a steep decline, okay? And ideally, once again, that's not the case for you. We've had like a small minority, without exaggeration, probably sub 10%, that will have a retention chart that looks more like this, where it's a very gradual decline. At the end of the video, surprisingly, they'll still net about 50% of the people that'll be sitting there watching. But to no surprise, listen to this. These ones are typically 2 to 5 minute VSLs, okay? So people are more willing to stick around longer on a 2 to 5 minute VSL and watch the whole thing because it's less of their time. Human beings are pretty simple creatures. We don't want to spend significant amounts of time trying to figure things out, especially when somebody else is trying to sell us on doing it. We have to feed people information in a way that enables them to make decisions quickly. We have to help them understand what things are, and then once again, get them to the point where they can choose to take an action or leave to save their own time. Commonly, people will get frustrated with paid ads because they'll say things like, they'll hear feedback from their sales team like, oh, these people aren't watching the full VSL. It's some of the most selfish feedback ever because they don't understand human behavior. Well, if you do a good enough job in your VSL of essentially articulating to somebody, look, here's what we do in more detail. Here's how we can help in more detail. Here's some objections that we can handle in more detail. Here's some testimonials about people who have done it, that have trusted us, that we've made it work for. Here's the offer that I want to help you with. Here is some additional objections, some additional testimonials, and I'm going to reiterate the offer to you again. If you go through a nice VSL flow like that, or in some instances, the VSL can look like this. Here's how we want to help. Here's why it makes sense to let us help. Here's the offer that we want to use to help you. Here's some objections that we want to overcome about what we just made an offer on. Here's some testimonials from people who trusted us. Here's some additional information about why you should do it, or a summary to reiterate why you should do it. Here's some additional summarizations of the offer again. Just to reiterate, here's the offer one more time for you. Here's a final call to action, and maybe after that you pepper in some additional testimonials and add another call to action. You go through a VSL flow like that, it shouldn't come out to more than 10 or 15 minutes. And if you have a simple enough offer, you can articulate it in 2 to 5 minutes with ease. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but believe it or not, it's definitely possible. More so 5 minutes for sure, not necessarily 2 minutes. Much more probable that you can condense it to 5 minutes. If you can get whatever it is that normally takes you like a substantial amount of time to just sit there and rant about, go on and on and on and on, and just cut all the fluff, be a lot more direct, be efficient, understand the other person's trying to make a decision. They've given you their attention for whatever amount of time they're sitting here on your page for. You gotta feed them that information quickly, okay? So if you want a high retention chart, just remember, 2 to 5 minutes. If you have a lower retention chart, once again, it's because you made it 10 to 15 minutes, but the people who do stick around will be more sold. So my point, salespeople will get to this point where they're like, oh, these people aren't fucking watching the whole VSL, you know? And I'm having a harder time selling them. Generally, what happens there is you fail to master this next step, okay? So if you successfully get people to consume like a VSL or go through like a conversation essentially through the same steps, once again, typically what happens after that is they're gonna schedule a call, or they're gonna get to the point where it's like, okay, I'll talk to you guys. Like I wanna explore more about this and see whether it's for me or not, especially when it's high ticket, which it should be, okay? After that, what typically happens is the conversation, okay? This is the sales call. And this simple little flow of add to the page with the VSL to the call scheduler is why people fail with cold advertising, okay? They miss a tremendous gap right here between that VSL page and the conversation, okay? So remember, organically, if we try to replicate that same sales process via paid ads and we are self-aware of the customer path, a customer doesn't just go from seeing some, let's say like a YouTube short or a reel or a TikTok to just being like, oh, I'm gonna go click on the bio link in this guy's profile or this girl's profile, you know, and see what they're selling. They don't then just watch a VSL and jump on a call and show up super hot. It's like not how it works. What happens, right? What happens? Well, they start to consume a bunch of your other content. There's some other key videos or one super long key video that they consume that makes them show up to those calls. Very excited, very well framed, and wanting to buy, okay? So when we try to do paid ads and we miss that third step between the page and the call happening, okay? What is that window? That's our framing window, okay? Our framing window is critical to execute on successfully. Our framing window can typically be done very aggressively, and I just want to disclose for all the people that are going to try to just immediately have some kind of like defense mechanism that comes up when I say this advice. Remember, we're trying to condense the timeline here, okay? So in this specific window, once again, when we have our framing window, okay? Somebody's scheduled to have a conversation, and we have until the call time occurs to be able to hammer people, okay? So this specific window is our hammer cycle. This is when we have the opportunity to go through and just fucking pound people with content, okay? So there's a few key things that we wanna do. First of all, 6 emails per day between the time of the scheduled call and the call happening. This is, by the way, where I just gave you some framing and I said, hey, don't let any self-defense mechanisms come up and say, oh, that's too many. I don't wanna harass people, Jeremy. I don't want my leads to become framed and well sold before a call. You know, that is why you suck at paid ads and aren't able to scale to a couple $1 million a month, because you think that that's too much. When in reality, the leads who are interested enough to have booked a call with your organization, okay, if you successfully accomplish step 1 and 2 of generating interest in a paid ad, pushing them over to a VSL scheduler page and giving them additional information to make them say, yeah, you know, I'm curious enough to talk to these guys. Like my interest level's high enough to schedule a call. I have a few more questions I want answered about this. That's why I'm willing to get on a call with them. Okay? They're still not sold. This is the big thing. So when you're used to organic, okay, and I've talked about this in some of my other videos where I've talked to you about this interest level, okay? Organically, for a lead to show up as all of you describe as like hot and probable to buy, their interest has reached a point where they have enough conviction to be able to pull the trigger and say, you know what? This is for me, this makes sense, like I'm excited to buy it, you know, I'm looking forward for the opportunity. But there's a few levels that occur before sold, okay? So first of all, a level right below that is high conviction, okay? A level below that, we're gonna call general interest. A level below that is curious. And a level below that is, need more info. Okay, this is really the level where a lot of people generate their calls at, are these two gaps right here. This, when you look at the differences of your organic leads, okay, and your paid leads. Most of you guys are only working your paid leads up to a point where they're curious, or they're just like, I mean, that sounds like something that I could potentially do, you know, like I'll book a call and talk to these guys. And then you wait, you just wait. You just hammer them with like those stupid fucking, hey, you got a call coming up at 3 p.m. on Wednesday. You know, it's like, that's all you send them. That's it, okay? Or some of you are like, well, I don't just do that, Jeremy. You know, I send them like 2 emails that are a little bit educational and help them. You know, it's like, dude, you know how many fucking questions people have that got answered in between curious and sold, like your organic leads went through? There's a lot. There's definitely, as an example, just to be clear, if your usual cycle time between a scheduled call and the actual call time occurring is 72 hours, okay? That window for an organic lead might take weeks for them to consume this information. And if you don't think, watch this, if you don't think that there's 18 key touch points, okay, or key moments, or key questions that got answered. Don't look at it like some crazy, they gotta watch 18 full videos. Think of it like to go from curious to general interest to high conviction to sold, okay? There's definitely 18 questions that got answered that made them show up sold for the organic leads, and the difference once again between your paid leads, okay? So to be clear, to go from ad to VSL, okay, and to schedule. That's really all you did in these first 3 steps of the process. Now that generally might be anywhere from literally like 2 to maybe like 10 questions that got answered. Now here's the thing, some of these questions that get answered create additional questions, and that's typically what makes the person book a call. They're not necessarily booking a call like most of you think, where they're like, oh, I wanna book a call because I'm ready to buy. No, that's not why people book calls with your organization from paid ads. They're booking calls because they have additional questions that need answered. So if you want a lead who books a call to show up ready to buy, that means we have to answer all the questions that come up in between booking the call and the conversation. That's where those questions have to be answered. So the 6 emails a day, I honestly think that's light work. And I'm gonna give you a great example. I've talked about this in another video, okay? I pay an exceptional amount in taxes, okay? I'm just a little fucking tax cash cow that the government fucking milks every single month, okay? From the amount that I pay on a year-over-year basis. I hate taxes. Taxes cost me so much. But to be clear, I'm sitting there scrolling on Facebook or Instagram one day and I get targeted by an ad. It says, hey, Dubai has 0% corporate and personal taxes. You can move your United States entity into Dubai and we can lower your tax burden to 0. That ad got me like, you know, I doubt that, but like maybe. And I went to their page, they didn't even have a VSL, but it was a strong enough hook where I was like, I mean, fuck it, you know, I'll book a call, like why not? And I assumed, just given the fact that this was such a significant thing that they claimed they could do, that they would hammer me with a bunch of information. By the way, they had 9 days between the time that I booked and the time that the call was. They had that many people talking to them, or that small of a window per day that they were willing to talk to people with their reps or the business owners, however it worked out, to where once again I had 9 full days of just sitting there waiting. You either give them the information to think with, or they do the research if it's important enough to them. Given my year-over-year tax liability, and it consistently grows more by the year because I make more money every year, I have a lot of fucking questions about that claim they made, and it's important enough to me where I now, because I booked that call, want to research how that actually works and if it's possible, okay? So I sit back after I booked the call and I got nothing but those stupid fucking emails that people send of the, hey, your call's coming up 9 fucking days from now. I didn't get anything that was informative, educational, answering questions, setting expectations, feeding me testimonials and results, handling my objections. I didn't get shit like that. You know what instead I got, once again, was those stupid reminder emails like, hey, your call's coming up. Selfish organization that didn't do anything. To be clear, I instead go do research. And in my research, I talk to people, I use the internet, I ask ChatGPT, and everything concluded to the same thing. The conclusions from my own research all said, yeah, you're a United States citizen. Unless you renounce your citizenship, like you're still gonna pay taxes on that foreign income, even if it all flows through your Dubai entity, especially since in my case, it's typically generated from the United States, even though we do make money from all over the world, typically in our education company and in sometimes our agency with clients that we have internationally. But my point being, like, look, dude, I'd have to leave the United States, renounce my citizenship, yada, 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 not sit here and give you a tax lesson. But my point being, dude, those people had so much time to to be able to send me information. And if they would have sent me 10 fucking emails a day, I would have read every single one of them. If they, in those 10 emails per day, would have sent me videos of like, hey, here's some expectations. Hey, here's like some people that we moved from the United States that did this successfully and some of their questions that got answered. Hey, here's like some general FAQ things that we get on our calls, and like, here's what to kind of expect about the process and how long it takes. Here's like, think about all the objections that come up. Like, what's my probability in that example to get audited by the IRS or something? Probably high, you know? It's like, well, what about that objection? You know, what's my probability of getting audited? There's just so many questions that they could have so easily anticipated and just made content and emails for, that they could have hammered me with in between the time I booked and the time the call was, that would have made me show up to the call sold. Instead, I don't even show up, because by the time the call happens, I already did enough research and I'm not sold anymore. I think it's just a waste of time. And that's what happens. Most of you guys don't understand. This interest level shit is a dynamic thing. It fluctuates, okay? It moves up and down. It's not static. So at the time they see your ad, it goes from nothing to, you know, I could look more into that. They watch the VSL. It goes up to, well, I'm curious about that. You know, I have some additional questions I want answered. They book a call, okay? It goes to general interest at that point, or it just stays at curious. And then as time goes on with a lack of additional information, a lack of nurture, okay, the interest drops and then people don't show up. So if you suffer from a terrible show rate, you, my friend, are a culprit of not nurturing people well enough in the framing window, in the hammer cycle, okay? You just think selfishly that, oh, these people are booking a call. Of course they're fucking sold. Of course they're gonna show up. Like, they want what I got. Horrendous mindset. Horrendous mindset. You will never fucking make a ton of money when you're thinking like that. You know who you'll sell to? You'll sell to the people that are already sold, and that's it. You'll never master cold paid advertising, because cold paid advertising requires you to take people from unaware to aware to nurtured to sold, okay? If you leave out the biggest part of nurture, okay, and you think people just go from unaware, aware to sold, well, guess what? There's a very small percentage of the population on earth that has that. It's possible. You sell to a big enough demographic of people on earth, you could benefit from that little tiny fraction of a percentage, okay, that come through already sold and still make paid ads profitable. Okay? I've seen it happen. But to be clear, you want to make a greater return. You want to make the big fucking buku bucks, okay? You want to make the big dog money. You want to have multi-million-dollar months, let alone million-dollar months. Unaware to aware to nurture to sold, okay? That's the process. That's what you got to master. Once again, 6 emails a day, that's one fucking piece of how we're gonna hammer people. That's one detail of what we're gonna do in our hammer cycle, okay? In addition to that, I have this ad strategy. Currently teach it mainly to my inner circle students, and obviously I deploy it on behalf of my clients that we work with. And then in the coming weeks, I'm gonna unveil it to my master internet marketing students. I do that, to be clear, because like obviously I gotta show my clients first that it works, and I gotta try it across different niches. Then I roll it out to my inner circle students, because they all work in different niches and they're very high level people who will do it right away and also have direct access to me, so they can ask questions and tweak things. And then to be clear from there, after I see that it works for all of them as well, and we potentially fine tune the process further, then I roll it out to my general population students, my master internet marketing students, and they go out there, because once again, like I'm teaching it to them through like video lessons, I'm teaching it to them through like live calls, and then lastly, long story short, it gets out to people like you on YouTube who are gonna hear it, think you understand it as in-depth as all of those people I just talked about prior to you, and you think you're gonna go out there and take action and get a massive result with it. I will say this, okay? This hammer them strategy I'm about to describe is fucking awesome. However, be very, very clear on what I'm about to say, okay? I'm not gonna go through this entire video with you and explain the technicals of how to set it up. I'm not gonna explain the technicals of what specific pieces of content need to be within it. I'm not gonna give you examples of it, okay? You're on YouTube, you're watching this shit for free. I teach that kind of stuff to the people who pay me, and I think that's very fair. But I will explain the premise of it. So those of you who are sitting here watching this, who are smart enough to go out there and potentially take action on it, you'll do it and you'll get fucking killer results with it. And for those who want to do it and recognize the value I'm about to drop on you guys, there's a link in the description to join into my Inner Circle program or join into my Master Internet Marketing community and course. And I'd encourage you to do so you can get a ton of value from me well beyond what I do here in my YouTube videos. You'll find that link or the links in the description. I digress. The hammer them strategy, okay? This strategy is very simple to understand. We're gonna take the people who took the action where we need to nurture them, some kind of signal, like they booked a call. For the DM people out there, like the people who messaged you in the most recent like XYZ days, okay? And we need to have enough people to be able to actually get the these ads to fire off. So it's important to note, like if you're running on a low volume, you're gonna have to widen the window here. If you're operating on a high volume, then you can tighten the window to the literal time frame of when they schedule and when they actually have the call on average. So as an example, typically the bare minimum amount of people that you need to be able to get ads to fire off is 100. So if I have a custom audience that has 100 people within it and I get that within 72 hours or it's greater than 100 people, then great. I can have my timeline of like book calls literally be, okay, if somebody booked a call, they enter into this specific audience, and then after 72 hours, they drop out of this specific audience. If you do not have 100 people within 72 hours, you're gonna have to lengthen the window of time. So as an example, like we typically get people who are like just starting off, spending test budgets respectfully, that will have to widen this window to like a 30-day window as an example, just to capture 100 people within that audience. They enter when they take the action, and then 30 days later, they get dropped out of that audience dynamically with marketing automation, okay? Now to be clear, with this specific audience, we can do this on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn. You can even do it on fucking Snapchat if you wanted to, okay? It depends on how hard you want to go. You just got to make sure that you've got the audience set up, okay, of the people who took this specific action. Or for the people who do the DM strategies, this would be people who literally just message the page, and you're gonna put those people in an audience. And remember, same logic, as long as there's 100 people in there, that definitive timeline should be the literal window from when they schedule versus when they book. Or for a message campaign, it might be like, okay, they have a conversation with us on average for like 5 days, and then 3 days after that, so you'd have an 8-day cycle as an example from when they enter and start messaging to when the call actually happens, okay? Has to just be a minimum of 100 people, if not expanded out. Once you target that specific audience, okay, you are gonna put as many pieces of content that are helpful and nurture your sales process as you possibly can in front of these people, okay? So as an example, just to put this into perspective, there's this statistic in the advertising platforms known as frequency, okay? Frequency represents the amount of times that somebody saw whatever is within that campaign or whatever's in that ad set or ad group, okay? So as an example, if I take 50 pieces of content that help my sales process, that help nurture people, let's use the example once again that you have an hour-and-a-half podcast and you manage to clip that out into 50 different key moments that you're gonna turn into reels, okay? And I wanna get all 50 of those pieces of content in front of somebody within 72 hours, okay? Extremely aggressive. When they book the call, and by the way, you don't have to just do this for the time that they book the call. You can also do it to shorten your sales cycle by including a little bit of time for after they book the call for whatever your average sales cycle is. Or if you're a master, that can be a separate campaign with one set of content to aid your show rate and one set of content in the second campaign after the call occurs to aid the sales process and shorten that window where people are willing to buy. Now to be clear, that content, okay, that content needs to fall into a few specific categories. Remember, there's questions that come from the questions, there's expectations, there's objections, and then categorically there's some different things like money, like financing as an example, or okay, all kinds of things about money will come up. Timeline. There'll be a bountiful amount of ideas you can pull when you talk to your sales team. When you ask your sales team questions like, well, what are the most common things people ask when they show up to a call? What are the most common questions they ask after they get those questions answered? What are like the questions that relate to expectations, like timeline to get a result? Like what are the questions about money? Do people commonly have the money, or are people commonly having to use financing options? So as an example, in a piece of content, just to give you some real juice here, okay? If you commonly have a lot of people that need to finance, but on the sales call, you get a lot of resistance around an interest rate or like why they would finance it, and they might think that it's like irresponsible or something. In a piece of content, you can just demonstrate with math with a different example of why it might make sense to buy something on financing that can make them money, especially when there's a high probability of being able to make the money with whatever they're gonna finance, okay? It's not a car. Even in that example, like you can finance a car for personal usage, you can finance a car for commercial usage. The commercial usage loan is typically gonna have a slightly higher interest rate, but at the same time, that person's making money with the vehicle in those instances. The personal usage of the vehicle when you finance a car, all that additional interest is essentially just negligible and lost money. There's no real money being made from the vehicle unless, once once again, you can justify, well, you drive it to and from work, you drive it to and from like business meetings, blah, blah, blah. My point is, you give examples of why financing makes sense in a few different pieces of content. That way, by the time the sales call happens and they start talking about financing, the person has data to think with, okay? This is not to come off disrespectful to human beings, okay? And like the general public, and it's also not to sound like a conspiracy theorist. I am a propagandist, okay? I thoroughly believe through and through, and I see it firsthand every day as an advertiser at scale, spending a ton of money on propaganda distribution, the power of propaganda, okay? You commonly hear people, this is the most common way that people hear this, of, oh, don't watch the news like it's telling you what to think about things. Yeah. It absolutely is. 1,000% it is. There's like events that happen, and then the news is essentially just an ongoing stream of data to give people thoughts to think with about whatever happened. The sophisticated ways it's happening are on these social media platforms nowadays, in non-obvious ways, where it's like some random person who's dressed like a civilian is talking about some key event that happened and giving people thoughts to think with. When people are sitting there consuming data, like content, they're not just doing it mindlessly. Like what they're doing is they're inheriting those things that they're watching as data in their head. Now, unknowingly to them, that data they consume starts to become things that they think with, and sometimes they'll just regurgitate those same things that they've previously consumed as if they're their own thoughts, okay? That's how human beings work. Like, as an example, I've read an untold amount of books. I've watched an untold amount of courses, content, I don't even know how many conversations in my life. How silly and ridiculous does it sound to sit here and say, yeah, every thought I have is a unique thought to me? It's like, no. I'm taking a fuckload of data and combining it together in different ways, or sometimes just taking like literal thoughts that I know where they've come from and articulating it back out loud as once again, as if it's my own thoughts, okay? Those things happen all the time. People just aren't self-aware of it and they aren't admitting those things. So to be clear, if we can put the right data into the mind of a lead before a call with up to 6 emails a day or more if you want, with up to 50 pieces of content in 72 hours, okay? We will successfully, by the time that they get on that call, replicate the organic sales process via paid ads. We'll have condensed the timeline, okay? We'll have accomplished what we want to accomplish. We'll turn our salespeople into cashiers, okay? It's important to note, you judge the hammer them content strategy based on your ability to get the frequency as high as possible in your ideal timeline. So once again, ideally, I want a frequency, and it depends, of course, on the amount of content that you have. So if I only have like 20 pieces of content, I want my frequency to be 20. I want it to be as high as possible. And it's important to note, when you get the content in front of somebody, you want to make sure they never see that content again after they watch 3 seconds of it, okay? So after somebody sees one of those videos, they never see that one again. That way they get cycled to the next set of videos that come in front of them, okay? To be clear, if you successfully accomplish that nurture sequence, which as I mentioned, that is the missing step. That specifically is where most businesses fail at paid advertising. That's where most businesses fail at advertising in general, whether it's warm or cold. They think to themselves, okay, organically, like we're crushing it, we must have an incredible offer. Like let's just take this thing to paid ads and see if people buy it. And you forget, once again, you're not self-aware of the fact that like there's a customer path that occurs organically. There's a key set of videos or a big video that people consume that like makes them framed exceptionally well. Via paid ads, you're getting like, in some instances, literally just minutes per step. Okay? So when we talk about condensing the timeline, we're trying to rack up the amount of minutes that somebody's sitting there consuming our framing that we are trying to get in front of them, consuming the ways to think about what we're eventually going to sell to them on our sales calls, okay? Or in our conversations, wherever the sale's happening. So, moral of the story, okay? To master cold paid advertising, to get you to the point where you actually successfully pull off going from organic to warm to eventually cold ads, and you literally untap an infinitely large audience, okay? You have successfully accomplished and condensed the timeline. You've accomplished the path of unaware to aware to nurture to sold, my friend, okay? If you master that once again, it's because you've specifically mastered typically a few key things. Number one, you've mastered the direct response ads. You've successfully gotten people from just scrolling on the timeline mindlessly or watching whatever they were intending to watch and you pop up to getting enough interest generated to get them over to your page or start the conversation in DMs or register for your webinar, whatever the hell it is, okay? From there, you've gotten them on that step specifically nurtured even further, okay? And got them willing enough on the interest scale to say, you know what, yeah, I'm curious enough to take that next step, and they book a call, okay? And when they get to the point where they have that little window in between that action and the call happening or the webinar occurring, okay? Or whatever the specific sales event is, there's always a few days in between, okay? There's always a few days. That's your nurture window. You've accomplished the nurture window successfully if you make this work. And I'm telling you now, the nurture window is what amplifies the ROAS, okay? The nurture window specifically is what makes the return on your investment jump substantially. Like if you do the nurture window right, I promise, like if you're running paid ads profitably right now and you hear what I'm saying and you're not doing the nurture window, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You can already 1 + 1 = 2 come out the other side and say, yeah, no, that would make a huge fucking difference to my return on investment because it affects those following statistics of like your show rate, your close rate, you know, all that stuff that follows the actual sales event. Everything happens in the nurture sequence, okay? So once again, you've accomplished direct response ads. You've accomplished that next step for whatever gets them on to the point where they're ready to go to the sales point. And in between that and the sales point, you've mastered nurture in order to amplify your return on investment. Because here's the thing, organic is extremely appealing, but it's not necessarily within your control. All you can really do is put a lot of content in. So like as you put more content in, you typically get more out of the organic channels. But still, like you don't necessarily get to pick and choose who it gets in front of. You know, like these videos here, these are for people that want to make $1 million a month. I still get people occasionally that watch these that are like asking the most basic beginner questions about like something about my marketing agency. Like this has nothing to do with them, okay? I can't control who that gets in front of, okay? I can influence it with like titles and thumbnails and like the content obviously, but like whoever watches it still watches it, okay? Now, to be clear, organically, when I say it's not within your control, it's like, once again, the only input we really have is content, like some of those minor variables like titles, thumbnails, etc. Now, to be clear, warm paid ads, like that's where you've gotten enough of an audience where you can then say, okay, we want to retarget these people and start to hammer them a bit. They're warmed up enough, you know, where they're somewhat nurtured, and we just got to take them to a little bit more of an aggressive nurture sequence, or maybe we've never converted them organically and they're right there ready to buy. Like, let's start doing that. You've started that, you realize like there's a ceiling to it extremely quickly. Like you recognize it's completely dependent upon the size of the audience available to retarget. I had a guy, consulting client, we were scaling into the warm audience. We hit a certain point in revenue where like all it did was just kind of spin the tires and additional ad spend. There just wasn't more money to be made because the audience wasn't growing. And in addition to that, the guy wasn't putting in enough work on the organic side. So like organically, the fluctuations were extreme. They weren't consistent with the organic content distribution that they were putting out. So there'd be swings as big as like 60% drop-offs in the additional eyeballs coming in on the organic side. During those same windows, the paid ads for the warm audience would perform worse and they'd have to spend less money. So like my point being, you can only spend so much into a warm audience before you hit that ceiling. That's when you got to get into cold paid advertising. And as I mentioned, the significant degrees of difference between an organic lead, a warm audience lead, and a cold lead are so night and day. They're so polarizingly different if you don't do this process and you don't respect it for what it is, and you don't train your salespeople to differentiate where they're coming from. If I just have my sales team think everybody's an organic lead, like they're gonna suck ass on warm paid traffic. They're gonna suck even more ass on cold paid traffic. I have to be able to train my staff as well, or the webinar conversion points as well, around like what level of awareness people have and which specific audience type they're coming from in order to convert them best and respect them from where they're at in their sales process. So my point being, dude, you gotta master paid cold advertising. You've got to, okay? The ability to take somebody from unaware, aware, nurture, sold, man, I'm telling you now, you can make so much more money if you get cold paid advertising down, okay? Obviously, as an advertiser, I fucking crush it with warm paid advertising, cold paid advertising. Like, it's our bread and butter, man. We do this shit for a living, okay? We help people like you get to $1 million months. I'd love the opportunity to help you make more money, but I mean, look, there's only so much I can do for free here on YouTube, okay? The link's in the description. I have an opportunity, it's called my Inner Circle program, Jeremy's Inner Circle. Twice a month one-on-one calls, weekly group calls, a big group chat full of all the other people. The most recent 14 people who have joined, 130K a month was the lowest, 900K a month was the highest. These are some fucking big dogs in this group, okay? Outside of me that you get access to in this thing, there's a bunch of other heavy hitters that you get to access. I can't sit here and tell you that they're gonna answer every question you have, but dude, people participate in this group all the time. They just do it essentially because they want to give and take. They want people to answer their questions when they have stuff that they want. So if you want to come in. Oh, by the way, we also do masterminds every quarter. So we have an opportunity 4 times a year, January, April, July, and October at the top of every quarter to come in person. We also stream it remote. If you can't come in person, we also record it. There's an occasional session that we don't record when it's sensitive or something like that. But to be clear, for the majority, we record them all. And dude, you get all that. One-on-one calls, weekly group calls, group chat, masterminds, all inside of my Inner Circle program. And like I mentioned, I've got courses as well. It's my Master Internet Marketing program. High level information. One of my favorite authors, his name's Richard Bandler. And Richard Bandler, he says in his books, he always starts them off by saying, look, like some of this stuff, you're gonna have no idea what it is, how it works, and I'm not gonna talk to you like you're a beginner or you're a novice, okay? I'm gonna talk to you like I would talk to myself. Okay, I'm gonna teach you at the highest level possible, and you've just gotta trust that this is gonna click and that it's gonna make sense. And I love reading his books. They're so high level, and he's right. I mean, yeah, sometimes you gotta reread it, you gotta play it back, but without a shadow of a doubt, man, like you get to the point where you're at the end of the book and you're like, dude, I'm so glad that he taught the way that he did. That's what I've inherited as my teaching style in my Master Internet Marketing program. I talk at the highest level, whether you're a complete noob, whether you're somebody who's already spending a couple $100,000 or a couple million a month. I've got incredible feedback from literally each end of the spectrum and everybody in between on that program. It's incredible. And there's a link below where you can access it, you can apply. We also give away the first week of the 7-week program so you can check it out and see if it's for you or not. See if you like my teaching style and once again, the things that you're gonna learn. It's a lot of great stuff for you there. But yeah, anyway, look, I've got stuff to do. You've got stuff to do. Hope this video was helpful. Just remember one key thing. Master cold paid advertising. Remember the sequence, condense the timeline, like the video, comment, subscribe, and hey, go check out some of my other videos. My entire channel is dedicated to helping you hit $1 million months. I'll see you in another video. Talk soon.